I wish I knew how to start this video. Billy, because of his immense skill at making content and editing videos, I already feel like this is a disappointment because it's not going to be polished. But I promised Melvor I would tell the story to you. So here we go. I owe my life, as it exists, to Billy and the Game Chasers. I know that sounds hyperbolic. Hear me out. Okay? I started retro collecting in 2011. I wasn't aware of the Game Chasers yet. I had been a collector in general pretty much my whole life because I always hung on to stuff. But through a series of really poor decisions, I lost all my retro stuff. I didn't have a lot of impetus to get it back at the time. But as you fast forward to 2011, that's when I started retro collecting. The spark had hit. And within a year, I became aware of the Game Chasers and had been watching them on and off ever since. Those of you that are on the channel know that I've kind of been all over the place with content for a long time. That's the way I do things. I get interested in the subject, I do it, I move on, I integrate things and so forth. So it's all over the place, right? And eventually, by 2017, I am streaming variety streaming, Destiny, game shows, Watch Dogs, a bunch of various stuff, but I have like some mainstays, and it's a pretty solid community over on Twitch with a little bit of integration with YouTube. Through that community, through that fellowship, I decide, basically on a whim, looking back at it, to move from Iowa to Texas. The pitch was I would help solidify things, and there was a relationship that was supposed to grow there. That was going to be the thing, right? Well, guess what? Moving in with someone you met online without ever having meeting them in person in between, don't do that, okay? We both realized very quickly that the other person was not who we thought we needed at the time. So right away, it's not working. I ended up staying there for almost 2 years. Why, you may ask? I didn't really have the money to move anywhere else. I didn't want to stay where I was. I was in deep South Houston, Alvin, Texas, specifically. And if you know anything about that place, you know it is a shithole. Okay. I am at this point depressed. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'd gotten my income to a point where if I could get into a place, an inexpensive place, I could probably sustain the apartment, but the initial boost was not happening. So I was just depressed. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to stay where I was, right? And in this point of despair, I start watching Game Chasers again. And really hard, just binge. Every episode of the Game Chasers, every single free second of the day that I had. And I got to know the guys all over again in a way, and it really kind of latch on to their spirit. And I would, of course, admired Billy's editing and creativity and the humor and effortless just hilarity from all the guys, which I always had. But when you're watching it just straight through, you feel like you get to know these people. And I think anyone who's watching this that doesn't know me, or at least knows of the Game Chasers, knows exactly what I'm talking about. So immediately I felt more comfortable, and then I was able to, I would figure something out, right? But I need to stress to you that by late 2018, I was a diehard Game Chasers fan. I'd always really enjoyed their stuff, but that transition in those last couple of years where I was leaning into the Game Chasers as comfort food, so to speak. Die Hard. Loved it all. Paid attention to everything. I was going into the live streams, Billy or Jay, depending upon who was streaming what. And also what kind of mood I was in, you know? The more jokey I want to get, I go to Jay's stream. The more I just want to hang out, I go to Billy's stream. That's kind of what it ended up being for a long time. That was like my ritual. You know, and you slowly kind of get to know a few people in chat as well. And that becomes someplace you look forward to going every couple days or at least once a week or whatever. Then I get word in early 2019 that there's a Kickstarter coming out for a Game Chasers movie. I'm like, bet, this is perfect. I love this. I wanted this so bad I could taste it, because James Rolfe, the Angry Video Game Nerd, had put out a movie through a crowdfund years earlier, which I backed. I don't regret backing it. I like that movie. I just don't think that's the movie that people thought they were getting when they invested the money, and I can understand why people don't like that, but I had a really strong instinct that if the Game Chasers are putting out a movie, you're going to get what the Game Chasers are capable of giving you, even if it's not the movie you think you want, if that makes sense. I knew that whatever the Game Chasers would put out would be entertaining and would come from the heart and would be worth investing into. So I did. I put down my money, and it gets funded relatively quickly. And there's still plenty of time left in the fund to continue forward, right? So I make a video on my YouTube channel that is saying, hey, it's funded. There's stretch goals. If you've never done a crowdfund before, stretch goals are really important, because the more money that is on the table, there's some things that we could do. And like, for example, they wanted, at one point, there was a Hollywood actor that we were going to try and get a hold of. And I say we now because, as you guys probably know, I was in the movie. I didn't know this at the time, right? But we were going to get a movie star to come in, Danny Trejo, I believe it was. And it just didn't work out funds-wise, partially because we didn't hit certain goals, but we wanted to try. We wanted to try and get him in the movie. I'm glad that it didn't end up that way, because the person in the playing that role did a spot-on job. There was a thought that if we had enough money, we'd be able to pay Melvor's bills to a certain degree, so he would be able to take a hiatus from work to come work on the film. And I was very passionate about all of that, because I wanted them to go all in on whatever it was their creative vision was. And so I made a video saying, this is what this means. And I made it kind of like a Sunday monster truck kind of a thing. And it was just for fun, but also to hopefully get people to really push, because Jay and Billy are good entertainers. They're good creatives. They're good business people, but they're not good at begging for your money, because they are self-made men. Okay. And I knew they weren't going to really push for the stretch goals. They wanted it to go organically wherever it was going to go. And I respected that. And that's why I made the video, because they're not going to beg for the money, but I'll beg for the money for them, because I want them to have as much as possible. I didn't tag anybody in anything. I didn't use any crazy hashtags, as I recall. But I put in the title what's going on, and I put the video out. And I would just tweet out. I tweeted out the video once, and I think I might have put it on my Instagram or something. And within a couple of hours, the majority of the core Game Chasers kind of descended upon my YouTube channel and my socials to thank me for making this video, Billy included. So you had Billy, Jay, Chris, Eric, Chief. Everyone made some kind of comment and was real happy. Even Wood was there. Saying how it was very cool for me to do that. And I wasn't doing it for cool points. I was doing it because I want the movie to be the best possible movie it could be. But because of this, I start talking to a couple of guys. They recognize the name from chat. I'd come in the chat and be like, oh, you're that guy that made that thing. So there was more of a familiarity, and we became a lot more friendly. Chris and I start speaking in DMs pretty much every day. And I kind of gave him the short version of what was happening down in Houston, Alvin. And he was like, well, no, you're one of us. You need to come up to DFW. It wouldn't cost that much to get up here. There's, the cost of living here is not that bad. You'll make it. Just get up here. You're one of us. And he kept saying that over and over. And then finally, I'm getting to a point where the lease is up. I have nowhere to go. Nowhere. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was pretty sure that what I was going to end up having to do was pack all my stuff, put it into storage, and live out of my car until I could figure something out. Hand to Godzilla. That's what I thought was going to happen. And then out of the blue, my sister calls me and says that, hey, there was some stuff that we hadn't finished with the legalities of Mom's estate. My mom passed away 10 years ago. And there is some money with your name on it. And I said, well, how much? She said $2,000, which happened to be exactly the amount I needed to store everything that wasn't absolutely essential, hop in a car with all the stuff that is essential, and get to Dallas, DFW, with a place that I had scoped out that I would be able to get in for, I think it was like $800 down or something. I was able to get in there. So just the pricing of everything all worked out just right. So I feel like the timing is serendipitous. Mom's looking down, and the timing of all this stuff with the chasers. My cat's running around. So it all worked out to the point where I'm in DFW, or I'm about to leave to go to DFW. And as I'm on my way, Chris called me up and said, hey, where are you at? Thinking that I'd be in town by then. And I'm just getting on the road. And he says, well, just let me know when you get here. I work 10 minutes away from where you're staying. I'll help you unpack. I've never met this guy before. And just because I said something nice about him and his family on YouTube, and we got to talking and become friends that way, he wants to help me move into my apartment. I'll never forget that. I get into town. I miss my opportunity to get into the apartment because the office closed, right? So, but I had planned, like, if that happened, I'm going to stay at this Motel 6 across the street, right? And I tell Chris that not to worry about coming down. He says, you're not staying in a hotel. And he was like, here's my address. Come here. Long story short, I go to Redneck Chris's house and I meet him, and essentially we hit it off like crazy. We had a conversation that we picked up that like we had been friends for years and just were having a conversation. And it was streaming for some 7 freaking hours or whatever. And it was just like, well, I guess I am one of the boys, or at least to Chris, I'm one of the boys. A couple days goes by and I'm picking back up with work. I worked remotely at this point, so it was very easy for me to just pick up at work. And I had just gotten off of a shift, and Chris says, hey, you need to come to the Retropalooza after party, because he knew I was going to miss the actual day because I worked both Saturday and Sunday during the day. And I didn't feel like I had earned the right to go to that because I hadn't attended the thing and I didn't know the guys. He's like, fuck all that. Come on. So I go to the bar, Free Play, and I meet Billy and I meet Jay. And they both regard me the exact same way. They go, nice to meet you. Okay. Very kind, very polite, but they both looked me up and down, which I did not know what was going on. I'm like, are these guys checking me out? What the hell's going on? Of course, I know now they were looking at me to see if I was the right build, the right demeanor for Roy. 3 days later, 2 days later, because that was a Saturday, so it was like a Monday. I'm in this industrial studio on the outskirts of Dallas in my car waiting for signs of life to get into this place for an audition for Roy. Jay had reached out and said, I want you to be here to audition. There's a part I think might be right for you in the movie. So, of course, I'm going to wait in my car at this place, right? I start to see people going in, Billy chief among them. Billy going in. Chief wasn't there. Chief being primary. Anyway, Billy's going in. So I go in, and within less than a minute of just being there, he says, hey, could you give me a hand? I'm like, of course. And there's this padded bench he wants to move from one part of the studio to another to give people a place to sit. And I immediately think to myself, oh, they just want me to help out and hang out, which is kind of like that's part of the vibe when you're part of the crew. And there's a lot of folks that still fill that role where you're part of the circle, but your main thing, you're like a stage crew almost, which is really cool. And I was like, okay, that works for me. That's cool. I would love to do that. And I didn't say anything. I just kind of said, yeah, of course. And we move it. And then he hands me the sides for Roy. It says, I'll see you in a few minutes. So it was like a whirlwind of, I don't know these guys very well, but they know of me. Of course, I know them from YouTube, but they don't really know me that well. And yet they were taking me very seriously as somebody who was going to be in close proximity to them potentially for a long time. Blew my mind. You guys know by now, I do the audition, and within a couple hours, I had the part. We negotiated to make sure everything was taken care of. They made sure I got what I needed to take time off work to do it. Class act, top to bottom. Right. So I know there's a long lead up. Like you're like, you owe your life to these guys. What is this? Well, first of all, again, yeah, the money came from my sister and spiritually from my mother to make the move. But the idea to go to DFW, to come here, and this idea that there would be people waiting for me, that came from them. That came from Billy and Chris and Jay. Immediately, I am swept into this community by virtue of the after party from Retropalooza, meeting the boys, and then getting on this audition for the film. 10 days after the audition, I'm on the set in the movie. I meet Rob for the first time. I meet Chief for the first time. I think I met Eric at the Retropalooza thing, I'm pretty sure. I don't recall exactly how that all played out, but everyone I hadn't met by that point, I then met. No, I met Rob at the audition. What am I thinking? Such a blur. We do the movie. Principal photography is 3 weeks. It's a different vibe of working when you're in those situations. Billy had the weight of the world on his shoulders. This was his dream. He wanted to make happen. And you can tell he's under a lot of stress. But he was always very kind and very open about the collaborative nature of movie making and making sure that everyone had what they needed. And that he was a good director, that he always got what he wanted too, which is good, right? So we do the shoot, everything wraps, and that's tail end of November 2019, okay? So then with all that stuff wrapping, we know that there's going to be some reshoots, some pickup shots, things of that nature that's going to be coming. That's the plan anyway. So at this point, it's just, okay, let's see what happens. And then the early part of the year, like early January, there was a toy show, a small toy show that Jay had put on here in Arlington. Now, at this point, I wasn't really a toy collector. But there were some nice stuff there, and there were some video games there as well. So I bought a few Nintendo cartridges, and I bought some kind of rando toy stuff. I still have everything I bought at this thing. But I also bought a prototype, huge glass beer stein with the Game Chasers logo on it. And these were proofs that were sent by the company to see if they wanted to move forward with making them, in mass, like large quantities. And the logo was a little stretched, so they decided not to do it. But he had these couple of them. There was like 3 or 4 in existence total. He kept one. I think Jay might have one. And he had one to sell, and I bought it. And he was going to sell it for $20. I said I was happy to pay that for it. And he said, well, no, you're family. You can't. I'm like, yes. He said, take the fucking money, Bill. And he said 10. So I paid 10 for it. I still have it. I drink out of it on special occasions, and that will be happening soon as well. Just one example of it. If you've ever dealt with him in a bartering thing, he's always trying to make the deal better for you rather than him. And it took me a couple years to teach him, like, you can do what's beneficial for you without ripping people off. You selling people something that maybe you paid a little bit for, it's not ripping them off as long as you give them a good deal. You're not a scumbag for doing this. And some people will remember at Retropalooza, I would often take some of his stuff and put it wherever I was sitting to help sell it and make sure he was making money, because I wanted him not to have to worry about this stuff. But he was always very clear, like, don't rip anybody off. And I never ripped anybody off. Especially not on his behalf, as far as I'm concerned. I definitely wanted to make sure everyone got a good deal, or a good dill. I always thought that Billy said deal like it was a dill pickle. It's good dills. Go back, watch some of the episodes. I'm telling you, once you hear it, you won't unhear it. It's a thing. So now I'm firmly in DFW. All right, so that's the long-winded version of the story of how I get to DFW, how I get settled. We do the movie, we do the toy show. And then directly after the toy show, there's a showing of the rough cut of the movie. Billy worked pretty damn fast and got a rough cut of the movie made. And yeah, you could tell there's a lot missing, but it was like, wow, we really have something here. It was really cool. Next thing you know, pandemic hits. And, it takes the wind out of everybody's sails because you can't do nothing. Billy, guerrilla style, would get any shots he could get without having to worry about regulations and stay in place and all this stuff. But he had to wait, obviously, for a lot of the stuff to lift before he could film. But because of that, we would kind of talk back and forth. We'd get ideas back and forth on, like, he would tell me sometimes a problem he was having with a shot or a take. And not the overall movie, but often we'd talk about Roy stuff and figure out ways to fill in gaps and make things right. And I'd say, look, if you need ADR, if you need to reshoot something, I told him flat out, whatever it is, I'm game. And we would just talk back and forth, and often there'd be a piece of equipment or something that he was looking to buy. So if he'd already picked what he wanted, he trusted me, knew that I was very good at searching for things that, like, can you see if there's a better price on this? I'm good at that stuff. And we'd go through that process, or he'd say, I need something that does this within this price range. And I'd find it, and here's what I would use. And that was something that was part of our thing. We both loved technology. And we talked about it quite a bit. And we would joke and stuff like that. There was a real respect there and a love for sure. I enjoyed those conversations. I'm going to miss them. And that kind of carried on through. So because of the movie, because of the boys, I'm in Dallas-Fort Worth. Of course, you meet other people in life. Good friends of mine that live in some of the northwestern suburbs. I meet them in, I think, fall of 2020 through mutual friends and start hanging out with them. And They had been together a couple years at that point. Fast forward to fall of 22, after the premiere of the film. Okay, so this is now 2 years later plus. All right. Yes, I've been going to conventions with these guys and getting to know them better and hearing cool stories. And yes, the movie had come out and fans are starting to recognize me and stuff. And that's a cool thing. And that's a separate story, to be perfectly honest with you. 2 years later, these people that I met in DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth, that I would not have met had I not been in the city at that time. 2 years later, they get married south of the city. I'm invited. I go stag because I was single at the time. And a friend of theirs from Oregon had flown in. Her name's Lauren. After all the hoopla had died down, the reception was kind of just, kind of caramelizing itself into a regular party. Lauren comes bouncing over to me, as is very Lauren, and she introduced herself. I fell in love with her that night. We've been together for just shy of 3 years. We've been married for 2. I credit that to Billy and to Chris and to Jay for encouraging me to move to this city. Wouldn't have happened if I hadn't been in the city. Wouldn't be in the city if it wasn't for them. I could have taken that $2,000 and done something different, gone somewhere else. But I didn't. I became a chaser. That's why I'll be a chaser forever. I went from being depressed, not having direction, feeling completely unloved, to having a new family, a new purpose, getting to do something I'd always wanted to do, and doing it around people that cared about me and that I care about them, and that grew into a brotherhood and family that I'll never be able to replace. And because I geographically moved, I met other people that were just as loving, that they get married and I meet my wife at their wedding because of this. Because I don't get to this, it all lines up. And it's a pretty direct throughput for the most part. And that's why I owe my life to Billy and the Game Chasers. It's cliche to say in these moments that you can't imagine a world without somebody. I don't know what life looks like without Billy. He was the glue that held us together. But at the same time, we're still a brotherhood. We're still a family. And I hope that continues in a meaningful way. I don't have doubt that it will. But in these moments, you don't know what's going to happen. And I'm not talking about content. I'm not talking about conventions. I'm talking about the friendships. That's important to me. But I know that Billy would want that to happen. Sorry, I went off on a tangent. Billy, thank you for everything. I love you. I will miss you. And I'll probably talk about you every day for the rest of my life because you deserve it.